The night was colder than usual for early spring, the kind of cold that slipped beneath coats and gnawed at the bones. James Callahan, one of the wealthiest men in the city, sat in the back seat of his black Bentley, scrolling absently through his phone while his driver navigated the dimly lit streets. It was late, too late for him to be out after a long board meeting, but a craving for solitude had driven him to take the long route home. As the car slowed for a red light, something caught his eye. A small bundle lay against the side of an old bookstore, barely illuminated by the flickering glow of a street lamp. It wasn't unusual to see homeless people in this part of town, but something about the familiar curve of the figure made him pause. "Stop the car," James said abruptly. The driver glanced back in the mirror. "Sir, I said stop." The car rolled to the curb, and James stepped out into the biting wind. His expensive leather shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached the bundle. The closer he got, the faster his heart began to pound. The worn brown coat, the loosely tied hair. "Maria," he whispered. The woman stirred at the sound of her name. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him, she gasped, scrambling to sit up. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her lips trembled. "Mr. Callahan, what are you doing here?" Her voice was small, almost embarrassed. "I should be asking you that," James said, crouching down. "Why are you out here? Why aren't you at home?" She lowered her gaze, clutching her coat tighter. I didn't want to trouble you." James stared at her, bewildered. Maria had been his maid for over 3 years. Quiet, efficient, almost invisible in the way she carried out her work. But she had never once mentioned anything about her personal life. He had assumed she went home to some small apartment after her shifts. The thought that she had nowhere to go hadn't even crossed his mind. "Get in the car," he said firmly. "No, sir. I'm fine here." "You're shivering, Maria. That's not fine. Come on." She hesitated, then finally rose to her feet, moving like someone who had carried too many burdens for too long. The driver looked confused when James opened the door for her, but said nothing as she slid into the warm interior. They drove in silence until James spoke again. "How long have you been living on the street?" Maria kept her eyes on her hands. "A few weeks. A few weeks." His tone was sharper than he intended. "And you didn't tell me?" "It's not your problem, sir. I didn't want you to feel responsible." James shook his head in disbelief. "Responsible? You work in my house. You've taken care of my home for years. How could I not feel responsible?" When they reached his penthouse, James led her inside, ignoring her protests. The apartment was warm, filled with the faint scent of fresh lilies, the kind of place Maria had cleaned countless times but never truly been invited to stay in. "You'll sleep in the guest room tonight," he said. "And tomorrow, we're figuring this out." She murmured a quiet thank you, but her eyes remained wary, as if she didn't quite trust kindness when it came. Over the next few days, James learned more than he ever expected. Maria's landlord had sold the building she lived in, and she hadn't been able to find a new place she could afford. She had no family nearby and had been too proud to ask for help. She kept working for him during the day but returned to the streets at night, hoping it was temporary. James couldn't shake the image of her curled up on that sidewalk. Something about it haunted him. He had spent years building his fortune, surrounding himself with people who wanted something from him. But Maria had never asked for anything. So he decided to act. At first, it was simple. He paid for her to stay in a small apartment a few blocks from his building. But when she hesitated to accept even that, he told her bluntly, "This is not charity, Maria. It's an investment. You've given me years of your service. I'm just returning the favor." But that wasn't enough for James. The more he thought about it, the more he realized Maria's situation wasn't unique. Dozens of other workers in his company, janitors, cleaners, cafeteria staff, were probably living paycheck to paycheck, one emergency away from losing everything. He called a meeting with his board and announced a new housing initiative, affordable apartments for all low-income employees, funded entirely by his company's profits. The room went silent. Some called it financially unsound, but James didn't care. The press caught wind of it within days. Headlines buzzed with the story. Millionaire CEO starts housing program after finding employees sleeping on street. Maria hated the attention at first, but James noticed something. She began to walk a little taller, her smile returning slowly. The shadows under her eyes faded, and when reporters tried to get her to talk about her past, she simply said, "He saw me when no one else did. That's all that matters." Months passed, and the program changed lives. Employees who had been struggling now had stable homes. Children had safe places to sleep. And through it all, Maria remained by James's side, not just as his maid, but as someone he considered a friend. One evening, as the city lights shimmered below, James found her in the kitchen, humming softly as she arranged flowers. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "that night I saw you on the street. I think it changed me more than it changed you." She looked up, surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because I realized money means nothing if you can't use it to help someone who needs it. I've made a lot of deals in my life, Maria, but helping you, that's the best one I've ever made." Her eyes softened, and for the first time since that cold night, she let her guard down completely. "Then I'm glad you saw me." And James thought, maybe the greatest fortune a man could ever have wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives he touched when he decided to care.